a dancehall pioneer, a Kingston legend, a murder still unsolved. Who silenced Ranking Toyan? And why was his death just the beginning? The truth is darker than you think. Stick to the end to uncover the shocking conspiracy behind his life-taking. This isn't just music history. This is a crime story they don't want you to know. Ron Everton Letts was not born into fame, but into the beating heart of Kingston's unruly rhythms and unruly streets. Long before he became known as Ranking Toyan, he walked those cracked sidewalks of a city pulsing with rhythm and rage, a boy reared not by fortune, but by a grandmother whose only weapon was wisdom in a city at war with itself. By the time he was 13, ska had given way to reggae, and Kingston's ghettos had transformed into sound laboratories. Through it all, Toyan listened, observed, absorbed. By the time he stepped up to the mic in 1974, dancehall wasn't a genre, it was a movement. Toyan became its voice, or better yet, its conscience cloaked in fire. He toasted with the fury of the street preacher and the cadence of a prophet, weaving wordplay with worldly pain. His early run on the socialist roots and romantic hi-fi sound systems didn't just mark a debut, it etched a new blueprint for the DJ in dancehall. When his debut single, Disco Pants, hit in 1979, it wasn't a song that made the impact, it was a man who delivered it. There was a sneer in his tone, a smirk in his syllables. The streets were listening. The volcano was rising. Henry Junjo Laws, the man whose mind mapped the skeleton of modern dancehall, was assembling a cadre of lyrical assassins. Yellow Man, Barrington Levy, Ike Muff, Billy Boyle, and then came Ranking Toyan. Not with the pomp of a debutante, but with the silent swagger of a man who had already earned his stripes in the trenches. Under Junjo's stewardship, the dancehall sound would detonate into dominance, and Toyan was the spark that ignited it. The album, How the West Was Worn in 1981, wasn't just a debut, it was a manifesto. 15 tracks crafted with surgical precision by the legendary Roots Radix Band, filtered through the magic of dub scientist Hopeton Overton Brown, and laced with Toyan's militant yet mystical delivery. Part With Me, a heartfelt shout out to Barry G, the DJ who shifted Jamaican radio culture, revealed another side to Toyan, the loyalist, the appreciative griot. But even in praise, his tongue was blade sharp. As the Volcano crew expanded with Lil Jon and Coco T, Toyan was no longer just a spark. He was the engine. To new recruits like Coco T, he was a mentor and myth all in one. The hit Rocking Dolly wasn't born in the studio. It was born watching Toyan do tricks on a bicycle in the dusty streets of Kingston. That's the kind of impact he had. Life bled into lyrics, and lyrics reshaped life. But behind the music was a man entrenched in a city where melodies mingle with menace. Junjo Laws, a former political enforcer, blurred the lines between music and the underworld. So did Toyan. As Laws moved operations to New York in 1985, the Volcano crew splintered. The empire that once ruled dancehall with rhythm and rule disintegrated. And Toyan? He crossed the sea. The America that greeted Ranking Toyan wasn't welcoming. It was ruthless. The crack epidemic was in full swing. Caribbean immigrants, many of them refugees from Kingston's violence, recreated their rivalries on the asphalt jungles of Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Miami. Toyan became entangled. The stage lights dimmed. The clubs got smaller. The clientele got darker. There were whispers, not music whispers, but the whispers of fire weapons deals, betrayal. It's unclear if he was deported or left voluntarily, but by 1989, Ron Everton Letts was back in Kingston. Older, quieter, but still carrying that aura of a man who once shook dancehall to its core. He settled back into McCoy Lane, a neighborhood like many in Kingston. Beautiful on its surface, boiling underneath. McCoy Lane was at odds with neighboring Payne Avenue, a rivalry as old as the turf wars that defined Kingston's gang landscape. Toyan, perhaps thinking himself untouchable due to fame or naivety, aligned too casually with the volatile dynamics of these warring zones. He was said to carry a Magnum 44 revolver, a gleaming symbol of authority in a land where such tools carried status and danger in equal measure. That fire weapon drew attention, not from fans, but from enemies. The men from Payne Avenue had marked him, not just as a target for vengeance, but for acquisition, a weapon, a message. On a fateful night in 1991, Toyan was with Lil Jon, another stalwart of the sound system days. Outside, a group of men called for him. Jon pleaded with him not to respond. He sensed something, some premonition that history was about to shift violently. But Toyan stepped out, as if destiny had already drawn the curtain. Moments later, shots ripped through the night. One of the greatest voices of dancehall was silenced in an instant. For years, the narrative stayed simple. He was eliminated over a personal dispute about a weapon. But newer testimonies began to stir. Friends from McCoy Lane spoke of deeper, more sinister currents. Toyan wasn't just collateral, he was a statement. In the lawless theater of Kingston's gang culture, his unalive was both execution and robbery. They wanted his fire weapon. They wanted his image neutralized. They wanted to humiliate McCoy Lane by eliminating its most visible icon. The aftermath was catastrophic. Painland, a patchwork of tension already, descended further into darkness. Fire weapon became background noise. Retaliation followed. More lives were lost. The cycle, already decades old, was revitalized by the life taking a man who had once transcended his neighborhood through sheer vocal firepower. Now, he was another statistic in a war no one was winning. Ranking Toyan's death was not just a life-taking, it was a prophecy fulfilled. For decades, reggae and dancehall have carried within them the sound of resistance, the rage of poverty, the poetry of defiance. But increasingly, those sounds have been drowned out by shots. Artists like Panhead, Dirtsman, Garnett Silk, and Judgment Yard's own Judsman would follow Toyan into early graves. The 1990s became a bloodbath for talent. Greatness bled out in alleys and clubs, not just in Kingston, but across the Caribbean diaspora. Toyan never saw the genre. He helped Bill mutate into global reggaeton and Afrofusion hybrids. He never witnessed a reverence with which modern DJs quote his rhyme schemes or the academic study of his rhythms. His name, like many of his peers, faded under the glare of commercial giants, while his influence trickled like rainwater into the basements of modern sound systems. But the saddest truth? He might have sensed it all along. There's something prophetic in the way Toyan delivered his lyrics. A forewarning mass and braggadocio, a subtle despair beneath the bass lines. He wasn't just singing about the streets. He was the streets. And in the end, the streets claimed him. In the canon of reggae and dancehall, there are legends who live to tell their story. Then there are those who died too soon, whose voices echo louder because they were silenced prematurely. Ron Everton Letts, better known as Ranking Toyan, belongs to the latter, a martyr of music and a casualty of chaos. His story isn't just a tale of talent, but a tragedy of timing, trust, and terrain. He was more than a dancehall DJ. He was a mirror held up to Kingston's cracked face. And though that mirror was shattered with a single bullet, the reflection it gave us remains. Raw, unfiltered, unforgettable. He embodied a time when DJs were not just entertainers but educators, messengers armed with microphones instead of weapons. His lyrics weren't rhymes. They were revolutions disguised as rhythm. And when he stepped into a booth or onto a corner stage, the crowd didn't just hear sound, they heard scripture. That's why his absence carved a wound so deep in the dancehall community. It wasn't just about losing a voice, it was about losing a compass. Those who knew Ron Everton Letts personally describe a man who was both fire and frost. He could disarm a room with laughter or light it up with fury. He carried the soul of a griot and the swagger of a street king. But even the strongest warriors get weary. By the late 80s, his edges were fraying, dulled not by lack of talent, but by the weight of survival in a world where every bright flame seemed fated to burn out early. And yet he still believed. He still recorded, still mentored, still told young DJs to study not just the rhythm, but the reason. He reminded them that real dancehall came from the gut, from the grind, from the grace to rise after every fall. His final days weren't marked by silence, but by that same restless rhythm that defined his beginnings. If you listen closely, you can still hear him. In the echo of every bass line that shakes a street dance in Spanish Town. In the patois poetry of every rebel sound system in Trenchtown. In the digital rhythms that pulse through headphones in Tokyo and Toronto. Ranking Toyan never really left. He was etched into the DNA of dancehall the moment he first touched a mic. Jamaica's soil has swallowed too many suns. The graveyard has grown fat on the brilliance of the island's best. But legends like Ron Everton, let's refuse to rest quietly. They rise every time a beat drops. They rise in every verse that spits truth. They rise in every youth who dares to believe that lyrics can be lifelines. And that, in the end, is Toyan's true legacy. Not just the music, not just the mystery of his life taking, but the defiant, enduring truth that even when the body falls, the voice can still rise. Was Ranking Toyan unalive for a weapon, or was he sacrificed as a symbol of power in Kingston's brutal turf wars? Was his downfall written in rhythm or revenge? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Let his voice echo through your words. And if you want more raw truths buried beneath the beats, don't leave without subscribing.